5 years old is too young to fend for yourself. By T. Caring. Approximately 10,000 words. Content warning. 5 years old is too young to fend for yourself is a dark story, including child abuse, starvation, and losing hope in a system built to break it. Reader discretion is advised. Chapter 1. The innocent question that started the nightmare. March 28th, 3965. It was right before lunchtime when I asked my father if I could meet Madame Maria's children for my birthday. It was something I had been begging for since I discovered she had a child, let alone when she married, having gained a stepchild. The innocent little question that changed my life. From that of a spoiled brat to a child who basically had to raise herself.
Daddy, can I meet Jack and Kyle?
I asked the tall man as I approached the dining room table. The old wooden thing was still as solid as it had been thousands of years ago when it was first created. The room itself had blinding white walls that were mostly covered with paintings thousands of years older than I. I always felt slightly claustrophobic in this room. It was on the smaller side for a royal dining room, but it was Queen Lilith's favorite. Father's silent chuckle, alongside the gleam of humor in his violet eyes as he answered, would never have prepared me for what was to come.
I'm not the person to ask that question to. Why don't you ask Madame Maria herself?
Father gestured behind me to the woman who was all but my birth mother. Madame Maria's stiff, formal attire was undercut by the small, amused smile on her face as she tried to hide a giggle with her fist. She was always dressed to the nines, hair held in tight buns, but she could never keep a straight face around me. Madame Maria was my caretaker, hence had raised me in place of my birth mother, Queen Lilith. Unlike the queen, she was a loving, caring woman. I had been working up the courage to call her mom for the last several weeks, but I always got cold feet halfway through. Did Madame Maria even consider me as her own child? I didn't know, but the thought of being rejected hurt more than calling her Madame Maria.
But Madame Maria always says it's not up to her.
My voice was high-pitched as I dragged out the her in my sentence. I had been clearly whining, hoping to change my father's opinion, but he stood firm.
It's not up to me either. Ask your mother when she arrives for lunch. She'll tell you a definitive answer.
Father put me on his lap before hugging me. His long black velvet robe covered his arms, but his hands were as cold as they always were. Cold skin came naturally to those with ice-type magic, including me. I looked like a miniature female version of my father, with white hair, violet eyes, pale white skin tinged violet, and even his damned Roman nose.
But Queen Lilith hates me,
I said, my voice once again resembling that of a dying chicken in pitch. Father huffed a laugh, his voice full of amusement as he said,
Your mother doesn't hate you. She loves you deeply, but has a hard time showing it. She wasn't raised by the most affectionate of people either, after all.
Father kissed my forehead, his magic wrapping around me as it often did when we sat together. Mine joined it in a slow dance, resembling a father teaching his child the waltz in a snow-covered field. It was a safe, peaceful feeling as our magic joined. I had nearly forgotten my question until Father's low, rumbling voice interrupted the semi-doze I had fallen into.
I have to go, but your mother is here. Why don't you ask her?
Was Queen Lilith here? I looked over my shoulder to see the queen standing still. I would have thought she was frozen in place, if not for her twitching fingers with small sparks of fire igniting in her hands. What had upset her so much? Why had she glared at us as if trying to set us on fire? I definitely didn't want to ask my question now, especially as Father put me down from his lap. Frozen in place, I felt as if I were exposed to the glaring rays of the summer sun, rather than the cool early spring temperatures in the palace.
Ask me what?
came the sharply pointed barb from the woman who called herself my mother, even if she refused to allow me the privilege of calling her my mother.
It's nothing bad, just try to keep an open mind about it, all right?
Father walked around me to kiss Queen Lilith on the forehead, as he had done to me just moments before. The Queen's heated glare never left Father's form, easing the heat I felt from her angry magic as he walked away from me. My stance became looser as the heat left me, but my breath still caught with every word Queen Lilith said.
Stay away from our daughter.
It was as if Queen Lilith hoped to set Father on fire with her words alone. I could hear the veiled threat laced in those words, the anger she was barely keeping under control. But it was as if Father didn't consider her a threat. Instead, he chuckled, asking,
Or what? Will you chain me to my bed again? We had a lot of fun last time you did that.
The implication went over my head. I just wondered why being chained to a bed would be fun for anyone, let alone why Queen Lilith would chain Father to one. Queen Lilith's cheeks tinged a slight pink, her stance softening minutely as she pointed to the dining room door. Get out! We will talk later,
Yes, my queen.
Father said, still with a slight tinge of humor in his voice, before he kissed Queen Lilith on the lips. His smile only dimmed slightly when she didn't return the favor.
I love you.
Father's chest flattened when Queen Lilith remained silent. His smile was little more than a pained grimace as he walked out of the dining room. Queen Lilith's glare remained on his back long after his form disappeared. The sight of him disappearing around the corner felt like someone had twisted my gut with an emotion ever so familiar, yet I couldn't name it. Why did Queen Lilith act like she couldn't even stand him any time they were together? How were they considered the powerhouse couple of Norfarland if Queen Lilith hated his very guts? It never made sense to me. However, when Queen Lilith's hard, dark violet eyes turned to me, it was with significantly less venom than she had shown Father. I still felt like a bug under examination, but at least it no longer felt like the sun itself was glaring at me.
Stay away from your father. That man has no good intentions for you.
What did Queen Lilith mean by that? The Queen turned away from me, her cherry red heels clicking on the white marble flooring as she walked past me to the seat of the head of the family, a role she held formally as ruler of Norfarland, but everyone knew Father was the more powerful one in all aspects, even then. He was one of the 10 most powerful gods in existence. That he played house with us at all was a minor miracle. My family's history is full of god emperors all but ditching their spouses, only to appear again when they want something. Grandfather was among them, and so were my 2 closest great-grandmothers. The last god emperor to help raise their children was my 3 times great-grandmother, Asta. But I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was that Queen Lilith chased off my loving father. As such, I was more than a little put out when Queen Lilith ordered me to my seat.
Sit.
However, even at my young age, I wasn't idiotic enough to deny her. The woman terrified me, after all. So, with little more than a huff accompanied by a pout, I sat in my chair to the right of Queen Lilith. The chair itself was smaller than Lilith's, but still larger than the one next to me that Madame Maria sat in. Servants entered the room with plates full of Mexican food. It wasn't my favorite by a long shot, but I was partial to the quesadillas. Something about the mix of bell peppers, onions, and chicken, coated in cheese, just tickled my brain. It wasn't until halfway through our meal that Queen Lilith addressed the elephant in the room.
What did you ask your father, Emily?
Her voice no longer had the barbed tone it once had. Instead, it sounded once again like sickeningly sweet honey. I had gotten used to her false mood swings over the years. I knew better than to believe she was actually in a better mood. No, she was still moments from exploding. This was not the right time to ask her about seeing other children. She was the one insistent on my staying isolated from everyone, after all. I felt Queen Lilith's glare become more heated as I remained silent. I couldn't stay silent forever, but I didn't know what to ask that wouldn't cause her to explode. Maybe permission to paint my room? It was still the blinding pitch white it was painted even before I was born. However, there had to be a reason every room in the palace was pitch white, right? No, that was a stupid thing to ask for. She would have said no after all. What else could I ask? For a less girly outfit? To be allowed... My rambling thoughts were interrupted by Madame Maria's quietly amused voice. Her posh southern accent showed through even years after having moved to the capital.
Princess Emily was asking for permission to meet my children. She has been asking for the last several months, but I told her it was not up to me to answer. So she took it into her own hands and asked her father, despite my telling her, repeatedly, that I would ask you when the time was appropriate.
Madame Maria ran her fingers through my loose hair. A soft, amused smile accompanied the pointed barb at my lack of patience. She was clearly more amused than irritated with me. Queen Lilith huffed, less of an amused laugh in which I associated with my father, but a more dismissive sound.
No.
She said, dismissing the question without a second thought. With that, my hopes were dashed. Irritation replaced them. My quesadilla, which I had been merely shuffling around my plate, felt the brunt of my anger as I stabbed it hard with my fork.
Besides, you know I don't want Emily anywhere near that bastard son of my brother. Why in the world did you marry your own ex-husband's lover? I do not know, but I don't want my daughter around such low-born filth. I should have declared Lucia a traitor alongside my brother. It's only through my grace that your family is free at all, let alone reserving Jack a title after his father's stunt.
What did Queen Lilith mean by that? All I had heard about my uncle was good. Even Queen Lilith spoke of him kindly on most days. Something about how he helped end the war with Norway by calming the rebels, despite him already having been declared a traitor. Either way, it irritated me to hear Queen Lilith talking about the uncle I looked up to, let alone talk down to the woman I considered more my mother than Queen Lilith.
Understood, Queen Lilith.
Madame Maria was quiet, her voice no longer carrying the humor it once held. Instead, it sounded pained, as she looked at her plate with her head bowed low. I couldn't stand to see the woman who cared for me so much be berated. I blamed that for the worst decision of my early life.
Come on, Mom. If Queen Lilith is going to be cruel to you for no reason, then we don't need to be here.
I said, standing up before pulling Madame Maria up behind me. However, one venom-laced, honeyed sentence froze me in my tracks.
What did you call Maria, Emily?
Queen Lilith was beyond pissed, and I recognized it instantly.
Mom?
I asked, unsure if I was answering Queen Lilith's question or questioning what Queen Lilith would do to me. Queen Lilith had sparks of fire surrounding her. The sound of grinding teeth accompanied Queen Lilith's expression of pure hatred. Madame Maria's arms wrapped around me as I heard her plead.
Please, my queen, punish me. Emily is just a child. She doesn't know better.
Only for her pleas to fall on deaf ears.
You will both be punished. Guards, take Madame Maria away to the dungeon. She'll be punished later.
The guards in each corner of the dining room jumped into action. The sound of metal armor clanking against each other, hard-soled boots stomping on the ground filled the room. The sound of fabric ripping as Madame Maria was grabbed by the collar of her long red dress before they ripped me out of her arms. My arm twisted painfully as I tried to reach for her. Madame Maria's face was awash with terror, eyes wide, bolting from place to place as if looking for an escape. She pleaded with everyone in the room as she was dragged out of the dining room, as if she were a madwoman.
As for you, my daughter, you are going to be spending the next 5 days alone in your room to think. No food, no entertainment, nothing but your own thoughts to keep you company. We'll see who you call Mom after that.
Queen Lilith waved her hand as if waving an inconvenience away, rather than sentencing her own daughter to a slow, painful death.
Take her away. I still have lunch to finish.
As the doors closed behind us, I reached out to Queen Lilith. The Queen took a casual bite of food as I pleaded for my life.
Mom, please, no! Mom!
That was the last I saw of Queen Lilith for the next 5 days, and her casual disregard terrified me more than anything else had. Chapter 2. The most cruel of punishments. March 29th, 3965. It had been 24 hours since I had eaten what pathetic amount of lunch I had stomached the day before. My hunger wasn't helped by making myself so sick yesterday that I even threw up. It felt as if I were being eaten from the inside out. Even my determination to show Queen Lilith that she had failed in her task of punishing me was whittled away by the gnawing sensation. At least the Queen had failed to bore me to death. The guards had cleared my bedroom of nearly everything, but they didn't remove my large, pale wooden desk or the matching bookcase in bed itself. That only boring old medical books occupied the shelves of my bookcase made it useless in curing my boredom. However, my desk was full of many goodies. From art supplies to impossible-to-read homework, the possibilities felt as endless as my supplies. My room was covered with paper. The drawings were meaningless, but they showed how my willpower had waned over the last 24 hours. The earliest drawing showed a misplaced determination to continue calling Madame Maria Mom, for no real mom would do this to their child. The latest one was half plastered to my face from where I had laid my head down on the still drying paint. It was a picture of me holding my stomach, saying, "Hungry." But the paint had smeared, so it looked more like a blob of colors than any actual form. Everything but the word hungry, at least. The word seemed to mock me with its dancing letters that wouldn't stay still. My growling stomach was the only sound in the room. Even my breathing was too shallow, too quiet in the still silence. The smell of acrylic paint clogged my nostrils, but the smell of my sweat was overpowering. Needless to say, I had learned my lesson about antagonizing Queen Lilith. The woman would make my life hell if I did. Would the guards let me out if I swore I had learned my lesson? No. The Queen was not a woman to do things by halves. If she said 5 days, then she would accept no less, even if it meant finding my corpse at the end of those 5 days. At least she hadn't cut off the water to my bathroom, though I learned a lesson when I tried to cure my hunger with water. The half hour I spent throwing up afterwards was pure agony. All the water was out of my stomach within the first 5 minutes, but the rest of the time was spent dry heaving. Where was Father when I needed him? He had normally come to get me out of the worst of Queen Lilith's punishments by now. That he hadn't come meant the Queen must have lied about what happened. Had he thought I was staying over with Madame Maria and her family as I got to know them? Had the Queen lied about approving the visit? Would he find my absence suspicious at all? I didn't know, but that I hadn't even felt his magic reach out to check up on me felt like I had been stabbed. Why had Queen Lilith ever thought this was an appropriate punishment? Even if I were wrong, that was no reason to starve someone, let alone your own daughter, to death. Right? She must have found some kind of pleasure in knowing her daughter would die by the end of her punishment. I might have learned my lesson not to antagonize the woman, but by gods did I hate her. What kind of sick, demented freak of nature finds pleasure in abusing children, let alone their own children? Yes, I hated Queen Lilith, perhaps more than I ever had before. However, my hate didn't overshadow my fear of her. I would watch what I said around her from now on. If the woman could kill me for a slight, what would she do if I insulted her? What would she do if I tried to get her into trouble? I didn't want to know. However, could I lie to Father if it came to that? The gnawing growl in my stomach was answer enough. An answer I felt bad about, as I felt Father's distant ice magic for the first time in the last 24 hours. It was at peace, unworried about me. Despite knowing he must not have known what happened, it still felt like a betrayal. Like he didn't care I was suffering. However, my magic still reached out for him, like a child begging for attention. Because I was a child begging for care from one of the few adults I trusted in my life. Father didn't react at first. He was almost out of range of my magic before he stopped, letting his magic reach out to touch mine in its ever-so-familiar song and dance. I felt his shock, his worry as it registered to him what he was feeling. Within milliseconds, Father's magic was wrapped around me, checking me over as the man himself hurried to my bedroom. He was only stopped by the sickly fire that was Queen Lilith. Then he turned around, walking away from me even as his magic stayed. Had Father just abandoned me to die? No. His icy cold magic still encircled me, his worry clear even as it concentrated on a single spot on my desk. In a flash of dim light, a glowing blue crystal bowl appeared in front of me. The smell of heavenly soup filled my nose. I almost couldn't believe it. Sitting up, I saw what I half considered to be an optical illusion created by hunger. I didn't even pay any mind to the paper plastered to my face as I lifted the spoon resting in the bowl to see the contents stir. A cheesy orange broth filled with chunks of broccoli alongside chicken. The glowing golden spoon clinked against the side of the bowl as I lifted what had to equal heaven's ambrosia to my lips. The thick, savory cheese broth tasted as if the god of food itself had created it. After that first taste, I couldn't stop myself from gulping down the rest. It was as if I were a person possessed as I grabbed the entire bowl and started downing the ambrosia of life. Large gulps of food followed one after another. I was barely even tasting it, let alone chewing it, in my manic need to have more. When the bowl was empty, I looked around for more, only to see none. Instead, a note caught my eye. It was filled to the brim with Father's small, fanciful cursive, more resembling scribbles than letters with my dyslexia.
Emily? You... not feeding you? Lilith? Me? You? Anna? But... be... if... here. Do you need...
The note continued for quite a while. However, I couldn't read an entire sentence in it. My name, the word feed, alongside several question marks, was all I could understand. Was Father asking why I was hungry, or if I was hungry? Would he give me more food if I asked for it? How was he expecting me to reply in the first place? It wasn't as if he could hear me halfway across the palace. Did he expect me to write what was wrong? I had a pen, but how did I explain it? It wasn't as if I knew how to spell many words, let alone correctly. I could have tried to spell my words out, but I also didn't want to make a fool of myself by misspelling everything. Instead, I settled on a single word.
Hungry!
I wrote on the paper under Father's own scribbles. To my amazement, Another bowl of that same soup appeared and was eaten at a much calmer pace than the first. I no longer felt the strong, gnawing hunger that was all-consuming, even if I was still hungry by the end of the second bowl. Would more bowls of soup appear if I asked for them? Another.
Hungry!
Later proved the theory. Father hadn't abandoned me. He just couldn't have come at that moment. I was familiar enough with that line of thought. So the days of my punishment passed in a flurry of artwork and soup. The God-given food never lost its flavor, nor did the pile of paper ever run out. Now, if only it had stayed that way. Chapter 3. The Lies We Tell Ourselves and Others. April 2nd, 3965. 5 days after my solitary confinement began, it ended with a bang. The sound of my bedroom door slamming into the wall startled me awake.
Emily!
Madame Maria's voice echoed throughout my room. If I hadn't been lying down, I would have jumped a foot into the air. As it was, I barely registered the sounds of shuffling feet before I was wrapped in the biggest bear hug of my life.
Oh, thank gods.
Madame Maria's warm arms wrapped around me like a worried mother seeing their child for the first time in days. My face firmly pressed against her stiff brown dress until she pulled back, rubbing her hand against my paint-covered cheek to remove the dried substance.
Are you all right? What did you get up to while in here? Why are you covered in paint?
She asked, as if everything in my room wasn't covered with paper.
It does not look like you lost too much weight while in here. Did a guard sneak you food as I asked them to? Or did your father have something to do with that? Do not answer. If you do, then I will have to report it to Queen Lilith, and she will figure out a way to stop it. As it was, the ward she placed around your room was already—
Madame Maria's voice died off as a guard in the doorway cleared his throat before he unsheathed his sword enough to convey a threat. What that threat was, I didn't know, but judging by how Madame Maria's face blanched at the sight of it, it was bad. Even if I hadn't known that before, Madame Maria's sudden disentanglement from me would have alerted me.
Madame Maria, what's wrong? Do I need to beat up that big, mean guard for you?
I puffed out my chest before glaring at the large, muscly guard, but I was turned away by Madame Maria. She had a small, bitter smile on her face, still pale from the threat in the room, but clearly trying to keep it together. Her voice had an unusual tremble as she stood up, grimacing from pain I couldn't identify. Wherever she was injured was covered by her long-sleeved, high-necked dress. It sent a bolt of fear through me at the sight of the woman I called my mother as she hid her pain. But I wasn't foolish enough to call it out. Madame Maria never liked it when I called out her injuries. So I kept quiet, even though I sent another withering glare at the guard. The guard's shivering, chattering teeth were all I needed to know that my intention of freezing him with magic was partly successful. How dare that man threaten the kindest woman in the entire palace? My attention was once again brought back to Madame Maria as she turned my face to look at her. A small, genuine smile on her face, a slight laugh in her tone as she said,
You have a real venomous glare there, Princess Emily. Make sure you do not wear it out on someone who is not at fault. The guard is merely doing their job. It is I who overstepped.
Madame Maria gestured for me to follow her to the bathroom. Her limping steps caused me to once again glare at the guard before getting up to follow her. Once we were alone in the bathroom, the door firmly shut behind us, Madame Maria once again brought me into a tight hug. Her voice broke, turning stilted, as she buried her head in my hair.
I love you so much, my daughter. But please never call me Mum again.
My initial gut instinct was to protest, but upon seeing Madame Maria's glimmering wet eyes and pained grimace as she stepped back, I knew I should just follow orders. I was wrong to call Madame Maria Mom anyway. If I hadn't, none of this would have happened.
All right, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to get hurt.
My disappointment was obvious in my stilted voice. At least I got Madame Maria to admit she thought of me as a daughter. I would just have to live with that. Madame Maria kissed my forehead in a moment, much like Father would before she grabbed my hands, rubbing them with her thumbs.
I would take 1,000,000 punishments if it meant your smile never dulled, my dear Emily. However, for us to enjoy our time together from now on, it means I have to be more callous, I guess you could say. It is the only way I can continue to protect you. So please do not take it personally if I order you around and no longer share a laugh with you. I still love you, but I have to do so.
She brushed her fingers through my hair, grimacing as they caught on a bit of dried paint. The familiar gesture brought ease to my aching chest. It wasn't as if Madame Maria was going away for good. She just had to be more distant for my own good. It wasn't like this had to have been a permanent arrangement, right? So why did my heart hurt like it was being squeezed? Like slowly, those who brought me comfort were being taken away from me. Why did I feel so lonely when Madame Maria was right in front of me?
Come, let us get you showered. We might make it to lunch if we hurry. Pay attention while I wash you. I don't know how long I have to take care of you from now on.
Was Madame Maria going to be replaced? I never got the answer to that question. Instead, the next several hours were filled with grooming, ending with Madame Maria declaring half of my hair a lost cause. A surprise haircut later, 3/4 of my long hair was lopped off. The remaining barely went past my shoulders and was put up to disguise the dramatic hair loss. I wasn't married or engaged, so I didn't need my hair up, but I still preferred it to the sight of my missing hair. I always liked my long hair, even if I didn't like the other overly feminine ways Queen Lilith liked to dress me in. There had to be a reason Queen Lilith preferred me in tulle skirts, but I preferred things that allowed for better movement. Pants were even more preferable, but I had only gotten away with wearing one of those. An old pair of jacks, conveniently enough. Madame Maria was certain that if I wore a pair, I would no longer want one. It backfired spectacularly. In the end, we made it to lunch. However, the loud screaming match in the dining room could be heard even through closed doors. Father was pissed, to say the least.
Where is our daughter, Lilith? You swore she'd be here for breakfast, but she has yet to appear. She didn't even ask me for breakfast today.
I told you once, so I'll tell you again. That brat of a daughter of yours is just spoiled. If she chose not to eat the food they were serving her during her school trip, then it's not my fault she starved herself. You should have let her. How else is she supposed to learn her lesson?
It felt like a slap in the face to hear Queen Lilith call me Father's child, rather than acknowledge I was also related to her. It hurt almost as much as the bitter hate laced throughout her words. Though my theory that she had been lying to Father was proven true, the fact left a bitter taste in my mouth.
If that were true, then why did you raise a ward around Emily's room? Don't you dare lie to me.
The sound of Father's booming voice made me flinch back. The hand that was outstretched for the handle pulled back as if slapped.
To keep unwanted visitors out of it, of course. You didn't want the wards around her room to fall, did you?
Queen Lilith made little sense. Why would the wards around my room have fallen if I were gone for 5 days? And why would her ward have prevented them from falling? I had the powerful urge to open the door to protest, to tell Father everything that had transpired over the last 5 days. However, the mere thought sent a gnawing hunger through my stomach. If I tattled on Queen Lilith, would she still be able to put me in isolation? Or would the old saying of snitches get stitches prove true? The mere thought of going a day without food again made me reconsider the thought of telling on the Queen. It wasn't as if anything would have changed anyway. So why had I hesitated to open the door? let alone long enough for Madame Maria to take it into her own trembling hands. Her face blanched more than it had at any other point in my life as the large white doors opened silently. The arguing couple paused in their fight as the hallway light lit up the dark room. Swirling strands of agitated magic surrounded them. Lilith's crackling red flames fought Father's cold snow as if losing wasn't an option. The effect was ruined because I knew Father could have snuffed out Lilith's flames before she ever spoke a word. That the flames were immediately doused with Father's icy magic when he saw me was proof enough.
Emily!
Father wrapped me in his arms as if he had feared I was dead. His cool skin felt wonderful on mine, even as I felt Queen Lilith's heated glare upon us. It felt like she was trying to light us on fire with her irritated magic, but I didn't care. Instead, I returned the hug just as fiercely as I had received it. My eyes burned as wet tracks stained Father's robe. Father's magic wrapped around me, shielding me from Lilith's glare as I buried myself in his robe. The expensive black velvet was soft, feeling so much like home that I almost believed I was safe.
Where had you gone?
Father asked, his voice soft with a love I felt from no one else. Where should I have started? That I called Madame Maria Mom in front of Lilith? That Lilith had punished me by putting me in solitary confinement for 5 days? Or would it have been better to tell him I was thankful for the food because otherwise I would have died? My head was so full of questions I didn't know where to start, but I knew I was safe in Father's arms. A delusion that was quickly shattered when Queen Lilith cleared her throat. Her glare was just as heated, if not even more venomous, than it had been before. It felt like she was trying to kill me with her eyes alone, as she said,
Emily was on a school trip. Right, Emily?
The emphasis the Queen put on my name put me on edge. Would she kill me if I contradicted her? She would try, at the very least. If not directly, then indirectly through starvation. The only hope I had was that Father would see through my lie. My father loosened his hold so we could look face to face. My eyes were still red and painful, my vision blurry, as I lied to my father for the first time in my life.
Queen Lilith is telling the truth,
I said, praying that Father wouldn't believe me. By his deep-set frown, he clearly didn't, but he didn't contradict me either.
We will talk more later, but no, I can do nothing unless I know what's happening.
Father's voice had a stone-clad hardness to it that let me know I had just made the wrong decision. But what had been the right one? Would Father have truly protected me from Queen Lilith? If I had told the truth, would Father have acted against Queen Lilith? I didn't know. And that was terrifying. Chapter 4. The Back of a Father. Morning of April 28th, 3965. The numbers on the whiteboard seemed to dance, changing with every blink of an eye. Madame Maria would normally tell me what the board said, but she no longer did. Queen Lilith called it cheating. She said it was only because Madame Maria was helping me that I had such a high grade as I did. She ended up being right. My grades had fallen dramatically ever since. I had gotten nothing lower than 100% in my life, but I only got an 89 on my latest math test. Mr. Claremont had at least given me partial credit for the questions in which I did the math right, but got the numbers mixed up. But it was still dramatically lower than before. I would have had to answer to Queen Lilith soon enough. I just hoped Father would be there when she confronted me. He was always more on top of my grades than Queen Lilith, but who knew if the Queen would be invested in seeing me fail as proof of her claim? She had done it before. A knock on the door to my small classroom startled me from my ever-unsuccessful attempt to make sense of Mr. Claremont's squiggles. Father stepped in upon receiving grumbling permission from the teacher. Though Mr. Claremont quickly turned into a stuttering mess upon seeing Father, His words jumbled together into nonsense that Father silenced with a single word.
Stop.
Father said, silencing the whimpering man on the floor. How he got there, I didn't know or care.
I'm taking Emily for the rest of the day. You may return to the rest of your duties. Emily, come here.
Father was using his no-nonsense voice. He must have been really mad about my grade.
Yes, Father,
I said, following him out of the classroom onto the hallway of the Royal Air's wing. The hallway itself was brightly lit. Light crystals lit the path where the hallway wasn't open to the royal courtyard. The glittering light danced on the white stone clad on every surface as if filtered through water. An apt description, because it felt like I was drowning, and I had felt that way ever since Queen Lilith had me isolated. I had no room to breathe that month. It felt like every action I took was judged harshly by everyone around me. Even Madame Maria had been snappish at my smallest mistake. It was as if I had been moved from the playpen to a boiling pot of water. Father had been my refuge, but now I was in trouble with him because of my poor grades. It was only the quiet creaking of the hinges on my bedroom door that alerted me to our arrival. I had been too busy staring at Father's feet to notice.
Go in, unless you want this conversation done in public.
Father's voice had an edge of irritation. He only had that when he was really mad. A few poor grades shouldn't have set him off this badly, right? It wasn't as if I had failed after all.
No, Father.
I ducked into my room, then waited for him on the other side. He seemed, if anything, more irritated that I had done so.
Sit.
Where should I have sat, though? Madame Maria always had me sit on my desk chair when she lectured me, but Father stopped me when I went to walk that way.
On the couch.
Why couldn't I have even done that right? Either way, I walked silently to the couch, then sat on the edge. I didn't want to get comfortable in case I received a lecture. Father stood in front of me for an uncomfortable amount of time, as if judging me for my incompetence. His black leather boots stood out prominently on the light gray carpet.
Do you have anything to tell me?
What had Father wanted me to tell him?
I'm sorry for getting a poor grade.
I asked, because, aside from that, I didn't know what could have set Father off.
And?
What else had Father wanted me to confess? I didn't know, so I remained silent. The wrong response, if Father's long breath was any indication.
I was wondering why your grades had dropped so suddenly 3 weeks ago. Lilith assured me you had been cheating and she put a stop to it, leading to your dropped grades. However, I want to hear it from your own mouth. Have you been cheating on your grades?
He asked, his voice rising with every word. I jerked my head up to look Father in the face. My mouth opened in what must have been a bewildered expression as I stumbled over my words.
No, never!
I said, indignant at the mere thought Father would believe anything the evil queen would say about me. Father's shoulders relaxed as I continued to plead my case.
My grades have fallen because Queen Lilith forced Madame Maria to stop helping me read the work, not because I was cheating.
Father released a deep breath before he slumped onto the couch next to me. Once released from his tight hold, Father's magic wrapped around me as if apologetic for his actions. Mine reached out tentatively, as I was afraid of getting hurt, but once it was greeted warmly, I knew Father didn't mean me harm. His cool arms wrapped around me as he lifted me onto his lap. I was still slightly indignant, but couldn't help my instinctual need to cuddle into Father. He was my security blanket from a world too cruel. I almost didn't hear Father when he asked,
How had Madame Maria helped you?
She would point to where I had made a mistake in my writing or reading, then tell me what it actually said. Nothing else, aside from the occasional clearer explanation.
It had been that way since before I started preschool, really. Though, judging by how the air cooled, Father didn't approve of something. A shiver racked through my body as I cuddled deeper into Father's large chest. Yes, Father must have been upset about something.
That seems reasonable enough. Why did Lilith think you were cheating? Was it not she who told Maria to help you with your schoolwork?
Father asked as he wrapped me in his black overrobe. Despite his minimal natural body heat, it still felt toasty warm in his robes. I felt safe in the warm darkness of his robe, as if he were shielding me from the universe itself. All I saw was his soft, illuminated face as he smiled at me, deepening the delusion. I blamed that for having let my guard down.
Queen Lilith has been looking for any reason to punish me again ever since I called Madame Maria Mom in front of her.
My voice came out muffled from the fact that my face was hidden in Father's shirt, my halfway-to-sleep state not helping. I didn't even notice my slip until the room plummeted in temperature. My breath came out in little puffs of clouds. My shivering doubled as the sound of Father's teeth grinding together filled the room. A peek outside the robe confirmed that literal ice crystals had formed on everything around us. Father was no longer just irritated. He was pissed.
I will not ask why you called Madame Maria Mom. That woman has been more of a mom to you than Lilith ever was. However, I am going to ask how Lilith punished you.
The ice spread with every word that left Father's mouth. Father had asked me several times what had happened during the week I was alone. I had avoided the topic, not wanting to lie to Father or get punished by Queen Lilith again. But that time was up. I either told the truth and risked isolation once again, or lied, risking abandonment by Father. Would Father have protected me from Lilith if he knew what had happened? What was the possibility Father would have believed me over Lilith anyway? If I lied, would Father ever believe me again? That last fear, if nothing else, had made my decision. I would tell Father the truth.
Father, Queen Lilith, she...
How could I have phrased it? That Lilith had me isolated in my room for 5 days without food? That she put me in solitary confinement? Either way, the decision was taken out of my hands as the doors to my room were blown open by a blast of explosive fire magic. The rapid clap of heels against the stone floor as Queen Lilith entered the room was my only warning before being smacked with something soft repeatedly. Father wrapped his arm around my head to protect it from the repeated blows, but I could hear every word the Queen rambled, even if I couldn't make sense of it.
How dare you? She's 5. Get your child predator hands off our child. Just because she's your soulmate doesn't mean you can prey upon her as you did me. This is why I hate you, Evilans. You're nothing better than a group of child rapists. It doesn't even matter if it's your own child.
A long stream of barely legible curses left the Queen's mouth as she continued to smack us. One particularly hard smack to my head hurt more than the others. A small whine of pain escaped me as the blows stopped. Father's magic shielded us from the onslaught of blows even as they continued.
Lilith, calm down. You're hurting Emily.
Father said, stopping Queen Lilith's barrage of insults.
No more than you are already, pervert. She started puberty early because of you. Get our daughter out of your robe, then we'll talk.
What did Queen Lilith mean by that? Was that why she had inundated my schoolwork with gross medical texts? Madame Maria had assured me I didn't need to worry about anything in the text for several more years, but Queen Lilith didn't think so. My train of thought was interrupted by Father moving his robe, so I was outside of it. I instantly gripped his arm as the Queen's furious glare raked over me. It felt like I was between a wall of ice and a blazing sun. My skin even turned red where the Queen's glare turned.
Emily, I need you to stay calm. Please walk over to your bed, then get under the covers. We need to talk, but I don't want you to get caught up in our fight.
By the icy glare Father had directed at Queen Lilith, I knew he didn't mean me when he said we. Why had Father asked me to get under the covers instead of having me leave if he didn't want me exposed to their fight? Either way, I did as told. The heat of the Queen's glare died off as I walked away from Father to wrap myself completely in my dark blankets. It didn't take long for me to notice the complete silence in the darkness. Father's magic also never left me. Instead, it felt like a cooling balm to my frayed nerves. I had almost deluded myself into thinking that everything had calmed down. However, I felt Queen Lilith's furious fire magic as it whipped around the room like a firestorm, as if it had attempted to set everything ablaze. Father's calming magic did nothing but upset it more. A violent whip of fire magic destroyed the ward Father had set up around me. The last words I would hear from Father's mouth for several months followed.
Fine, have it your way. I'll leave Emily alone, but if I learn of any injury to my daughter or of any unjust punishments, I will protect her, even if it is from yourself.
What? No! I threw the blankets off myself to see Father leaving my bedroom, his back to me as he walked out. Father? I asked, my voice hoarse from the fear that ran through me. He glanced back at me, then turned away, not saying a word, and closed the door as he left. Queen Lilith's heated glare turned to me. It felt like the sun itself was glaring holes into my head, but I didn't care. Father had just left me. Father had just abandoned me. It felt worse than if I had been stabbed in the heart. I didn't take in anything the Queen said in her long rant afterward, or even notice the guards as they removed everything from my room, aside from my furniture. No. All I could see was my closed bedroom door, alongside the memory of Father's back as he closed it behind him. I stayed frozen in shock for several more hours, even as my isolation once again started. Chapter 5. Complete Abandonment. Night of April 28th, 3965. It wasn't until several hours after my isolation began again that I fully came to terms with what had happened. Just because Father had walked away from me when I needed him didn't mean he had completely abandoned me, right? That I didn't feel his magic anywhere near me meant nothing, right? I wasn't completely alone because I had hesitated to give Father an answer, right? These questions and more had raced through my mind for the past 5 hours since I had come to. I had hardly left my bed for the entire time, even as the hunger from my missed lunch set in. The lunch that had been provided for me in my stupor had long since spoiled by the time I came out of it. Its existence had sparked a false hope that I would be fed during this time, but once dinner time came, no food was provided. A fact that felt almost as soul-crushing as Father's abandonment had been. How long would this isolation have lasted? Was Queen Lilith truly trying to kill me this time? The Queen was known for her harsh punishments. Surely Father would have done something when I didn't show up for dinner. Had Queen Lilith lied to him again? Why would he have believed her if she had? The so-called Heavenly Queen was nothing more than a monster wrapped in a sack of lies. I couldn't even occupy myself with painting, as Madame Maria had my painting supplies removed from my room shortly after the last incident. I still had paper, even pencils. I could have drawn, but my heart wasn't into it. The stack of papers I had was small anyway. It was as if Queen Lilith had taken everything out of my bare room. All but what I needed to do my homework, alongside those gross medical books she had been insistent on me reading. I had tried to do my homework, but even sounding out the words didn't seem to work. It was as if the letters kept moving every time I looked at them. B's kept changing into D's, F's to T's. Nothing looked right. Everything kept changing, and I was left holding the frayed ends of the rope. A metaphor that was apt for my daily life as well. I was so depressed that I almost didn't believe it when I felt Father's icy cold magic wrap around me. His concern was obvious in his magic, as it kept wrapping around me like a fretting parent. It checked over me even as my magic joined it, in its snow-covered waltz. The relief I felt upon feeling his magic was immediate, as if hours of worry had melted away. I couldn't understand the questions he had asked me, but I tried to call him to me. I needed my security blanket after my long day, or even a story to take my mind off things, neither of which happened. Instead, I was left alone. Father's gentle magic wrapped around me, neither with the weight nor the comfort of the man himself. My eyes stung as it became all too clear that Father wasn't coming. The familiar burning pain in my stomach seemed to double at the realization. Would Father even conjure me food? Had I truly been abandoned? No. Father's magic wouldn't have been there if he didn't still care for me. This was just like before. Something had kept Father away. What could have kept a god emperor away from his child was another question altogether. However, Father had always respected Mother's decisions, even if he didn't agree with them. It still felt like a slap in the face. My vision blurred as tears gathered in my eyes, only to be whisked away by Father's magic, as if it were really him wiping away my tears. His worry and sadness made me feel worse. However, I didn't want to be a burden. Burdens were abandoned. So when the icy magic tugged on me to follow it, I did. First, it led me to a portrait of a woman with long black hair, covered in clothing that I, not even in an economic boom, could have worn. The first queen of Norfarland had an ethereal beauty that no other afterward had replicated. But why had Father led me to this painting? Was there a secret passage behind it? The palace was littered with them, but if this painting led to one, then it must have been a magical passage, for right behind that wall was the main hallway. Either way, I didn't have the energy to investigate it. Father's magic tugged me away from it as well, so even if I wanted to investigate, I couldn't have. Before I could even think, I was sitting in my desk chair, a warm bowl of chicken soup in a blue crystal bowl in front of me. Steam rolled off it as a faint, luminous glow conjured rainbows in the steam. Was the soup radioactive? Why had it glowed? Then I remembered that the previous soups Father had conjured had also glowed. Everything Father conjured did. It had something to do with the excess magic he had used. I didn't fully understand it when I asked him. Either way, I knew it was safe. It tasted like heaven, as all the other soups Father had conjured. Despite the heavenly taste, it still felt like dust going down the gullet. My disappointment that Father himself hadn't come to rescue me made even water hard to swallow. However, I still ate the soup. Once the soup was gone, I braved the note Father left me, only to be surprised by semi-legible script. Father's traditional tight cursive had been replaced by a sans serif print. It was still more decorative than Times or Garamond, but significantly easier to read than his normal writing. That didn't mean he used words I knew how to read, just that it was legible.
Why are you not eating, Emily? Did Lilith... You again? I'm sorry I can't see you, but your mother has gone off the... I'm afraid that if I come near, she will lose it. Not even your mother could keep me away if you tell me what? At the... of the month. If... she would... like no other in this. If she were starving you. Please, Emily, tell me what is wrong. If not now over paper, then later, when we can talk in person. I would destroy for you, my daughter. Love, Jökull Eriksson, a.k.a. your father.
The note was shorter than the last one, but I understood significantly more of it. Enough to know Father wanted me to tell him what happened, and that he was staying away because of Queen Lilith. A bitter taste entered my mouth at the thought of the woman who hated my very guts, for no reason other than I was Father's child. That I was also her own didn't seem to matter to the woman. How should I have responded to Father? It wasn't like I knew how to read, let alone spell isolation, solitary, or even alone. I had just turned 5, for God's sake. I wasn't even in elementary school, yet Father expected me to respond coherently in written format? No, the conversation would have had to happen afterward. If only we had the chance to have that conversation afterward. My depression receded. My hunger hit anew. So I wrote hungry on the note, just as I had last time I was in isolation, for another bowl of soup. It never arrived. Instead, another note appeared on the paper, in that same semi-legible font.
I cannot any more food for you today. I have your body with too much magic. From now on, I will only you food once a day.
The only part I understood was that Father would only give me food once a day, as if I were a burden he had little patience for. Would there ever be a day he left me to starve? Like a pet he didn't care for anymore? The mere thought brought a choked sound from my throat. It felt like sandpaper as my eyes burned once again from tears. Tears Father's magic didn't wipe away as it retreated, leaving me utterly and completely alone for the first time in my life. I had truly been abandoned like an unwanted pet. Epilogue. 4 years later. October 30th, 3969. Madame Maria pulled my hair painfully as she worked it into its normal braided bun. Her impersonal voice no longer held the fondness it once did when I was younger. Mild irritation was the most I had gotten from her. I didn't complain. I had learned not to, for nothing but punishment came from complaints. It had been 4 years since Father abandoned me. The painful memory was still raw, but writing it down helped. What didn't help was Father all but disappearing from my life afterward. He kept his promise of feeding me at least once a day, but we had hardly spoken more than a sentence to each other since that fateful night in April. Queen Lilith had ramped up her punishments once Father was no longer interfering in them. I had learned the hard way to avoid conflict with her. The many long days I spent alone over the years had taught me that much. The large, purple bruise on the back of my hand as I held my pencil was a striking reminder to never step out of line. I had gotten good at reading and writing since I was 5. I didn't have a choice if I wanted to survive. However, the blank page in front of me, with only a heading, mocked me with its blankness. The heading, "The Secret of the Portrait," seemed anonymous enough, if you didn't know that the portrait of Queen Anslow led to a secret passage. I only learned of it myself the day after Father abandoned me. I was just too devastated to face it the night he left me. Something I regretted after I learned Father had been waiting for me on the other side of the portrait. Father didn't wait all night. Instead, he left another note I could barely understand. I kept all 3 legible notes Father left me, but didn't look at them until I started writing in that journal. They seemed to mock me, with information so freely given, but unable to be read in my younger state.
Why are you not eating, Emily? Did Lilith punish you again? I'm sorry I can't see you, but your mother has gone off the rails. I'm afraid that if I come near, she will lose it. However, not even your mother could keep me away if you tell me what happened at the beginning of the month. If anything, she would suffer my wrath like no other in this universe if she were starving you. Please, Emily, tell me what is wrong. If not now over paper, then later, when we can talk in person. I would destroy the universe for you, my precious daughter. Love, Jökull Eriksson, aka your father.
The first note had read as if he hadn't abandoned me moments later. Then again, from his point of view, he didn't. Instead, I was the one who rejected him. Had I been able to read the note, would I have rejected Father the same way I later did? The next time I saw him was months afterward, so I didn't know. But I wanted to say no.
I understand. However, I cannot conjure any more food for you today. I have already flooded your body with too much magic. From now on, I will only conjure you food once a day. I'm sorry.
The excuse fell flat, but it was true. I would rather have lost my magic than my father. But I wasn't foolish enough to think that Father wouldn't have blamed himself for it. My aggravation with the topic was only worsened by the last note.
I'm sorry, I'll leave you alone.
One short sentence was all I got after hours of agony and gut-wrenching sobs, which had followed my realization that I had been abandoned. It still felt like I was being stabbed in the heart just looking at it years later. You wouldn't have been able to tell just by looking at me. I had gotten good at masking how I felt. It was that or death. If Queen Lilith had killed me, would Father have known? The possibility had become all too real in recent months. However, I wouldn't die alone. My last brief note to Father assured that, at least. It was a small, bitter thing, but I couldn't help the flash of amused pride I felt upon putting it down. We would see who had the last laugh, Queen Lilith. Father, if you are reading this, know. Queen Lilith killed me. Hello, everyone. This is T. Caring, and thank you for listening to 5 Years Old is Too Young to Fend for Yourself. The written form of the complete novelette is currently available in my newsletter at tcaring.com, linked below. If you enjoyed this video, you may also enjoy my first novel in my How to Make a King series, Forged in the Dying Light, available on Amazon. It's a dark, epic science fantasy novel in which a princess wakes up to the tyranny of her country and becomes the prince he was always meant to be. Just be warned that it is a book for a mature audience, but not because of romance. Rather, because it, like 5 years, tackles some heavy subjects through the eyes of a 9-year-old Emily. It will also be linked below and on my channel page. I'm curious, who was your favorite character in 5 years? Mine's Emily, but I'll admit to being biased. Please tell me your answer below. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.